Good morning to all my friends and family, and welcome to this episode of Jim's 5am Club. It's going to be a cracker of a day, and it's going to be the day before Australia Day 2023. Let's go on a walk and talk this morning. I'm down here at Darling Harbour, and this whole precinct is being redeveloped by Mirvac. It only seems like yesterday when Darling Harbour and Harbourside were built, transforming this wasteland into a entertainment precinct back in the days when my children were growing up. It's quiet now, but the building and development will commence over the next months and will go for a few years, and will transform this area into a retail, commercial and residential hub within stepping distance, within a stone throwing distance of the Sydney CBD. What a beautiful, peaceful morning. How calm is it? The water is like lovey, as my Uncle George, my Auntie Frida, my mother, my father, and all of those good people who came before us would say whenever they would see water so still that you could see the reflections of the buildings and of nature being promoted wherever you looked. The book summary that I'd like to go through today is entitled The Art of Statistics by an author named David Spieglhalter, and is a topic which is near and dear to my heart, given that I spent most of my professional working career as a corporate accountant, having worked for some of the biggest and best corporations in the world. And what I've learnt over the years is that numbers can be whatever you want them to be. They can tell whichever story you want to tell. And when I was young and growing up, I remember in my early years an accountant saying, "You tell me what story you want to tell and sell, and I will create the numbers to sell that story." So numbers can be used to tell a story. They can be used for good. They can be used for bad. So what this book talks about is how to use numbers, how to use statistics, and if you're a user of numbers and statistics, to be cautious of those numbers that other people present to you, because as we said and as we know, they can be twisted, they can be turned, they can be manipulated to tell you what you want to hear, or to tell you what others want you to hear, but not necessarily always telling you the full story, not always telling you the accurate story, not always telling you a balanced story. And another great lesson that I've learnt from another book, from another author, is that numbers on their own mean nothing. So whenever somebody presents you with a number on its own, an isolated number, it means nothing. What you should be doing is you should be getting other numbers so that you can compare and contrast the number presented to other numbers, so you can get a sense of proportion and a sense of reality. So what we'll do is I'll just pull over here and just continue to pan around and show you how beautiful it is this morning. And we've got the seagulls flying about, making their morning chatter. And we'll just continue along this boardwalk and discuss this book in a little bit more detail so that we can learn something new and hopefully incorporate the learnings into our daily schedule to help us improve our lives and make things better, not only for us but for others as well. So the author kicks off the book here with an observation where he says that more data means that we need to be even more aware of what the evidence is actually worth. Statistical science is everywhere and influencing people's worldview and decision making. It helps us make sense of the world around, but it also allows other people to manipulate that worldview by manipulating the numbers that they present to us. We are, however, need to be careful of some traps that can skew the outcomes of our analysis. And there are a number of biases that the author talks about, knowing very well that confirmation biases are what drive us. Each person has their own worldview based on what they've learnt, what they've seen, and also what they've inherited from their parents, their friends, the media, the environment, or any influences. And we live in a world today where we have a huge number of social media influencers who aren't necessarily qualified to be influencers, other than the fact that they have a media platform in the form of YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, LinkedIn. They've got all of these available platforms that give them a voice, and they can project whatever opinions they have on whatever topic they have, with or without evidence. And because a lot of people can promote and say the same thing, what happens is that people tend to be overwhelmed with volume and think that volume is evidence. But what we've learnt over time, and what we will continue to learn over time, is that whilst everybody is entitled to their opinion, not all opinions are the same, not all opinions are equal. There are people who have heavyweight opinions, whose opinions matter, whose opinions reflect research and evidence. And there are also people who have lightweight, bird brain, pea brain opinions based on their own feelings and based on information, misinformation and disinformation that is threaded into the different media to promote self-interest, and are designed to create fear, uncertainty and doubts amongst people in order to control them, I guess, is the simple way of looking at it and thinking about it. So we need to understand that there are selection biases, there are measurement errors, and being accountant, as I said, I've worked with numbers all my life. I am very comfortable with numbers, understanding, as we said before, the relationship that they have to each other, the proportionality that they present. But we need to make sure that the research that we do, the numbers that we use, allow us to gain strong and balanced perspective rather than to use them to create fear, uncertainty and doubt, I guess is the word that I'm looking for. So a balanced approach is needed, and we need to be careful that the numbers that people use are not there to hoodwink us. So I guess we're living in a time and space where we have more information thrust in our way than any other generation that has ever lived. They say that these days we get more information, more data thrown at us, pushed to us in a week than what generations of our grandparents had in their whole lifetimes. And the question is, how do you make sense of all the media circus that we have around us? How do you decide who to listen to? How do you decide which numbers or which information or which statistics to trust and believe? How do we figure out whether or not it means what it means, or it's just there just to trick us into thinking that it means what it's shown to mean? So the big question that we need to ask ourselves, according to this author, is we need to look into the quality of the data behind the statistics, because it's the quality of the data source that is imperative. And if the data source doesn't have an auditability, can't be verified, can't be triangulated, then chances are that those statistics are BS, and the outcomes of those statistics cannot be trusted. So we need to understand what we are measuring, because data, as we said, can be heavily biased, and there are common patterns that we need to look out for. So just bear with me for a second. I'll just turn my page on my notes that I took on the bus. So there are common patterns in everything in life, everything that surrounds us. There are common patterns that govern human behaviour, because as humans we are habitual in nature and teleological in nature as well. We're habitual because we tend to repeat certain patterns, certain rituals, certain rhythms, certain behaviours on a regular basis based on the stimulus or the input that has come our way. And we are also teleological in nature, which means that we love solving the issues and problems that come our way. So because we love solving things, because we have confirmation biases, because we have different worldviews, then we will select different statistics or different items or elements of evidence to support our views. But in picking that evidence, we need to be careful that we're picking evidence which is accurate, which is correct, as opposed to picking stuff that is incorrect and manipulated, which will send us on a different path. What we need to understand is that we all have had a different past. There are no two people in the world who have lived exactly the same life. There are no two people who will ever see the same thing with the same view. we'll all have different views, different opinions, different perspectives based on the experiences that we've had throughout our lives that have compounded over time and are going to lead us to different viewpoints. So because we've had a different life, a different background, we've created experiences. As I said, we've created experiences, we've added meaning to it. We've got our own heuristical basis for understanding what is going on and what it means to us. Because it's all been different in the past, we've either created the experience, created the meaning, or we've inherited it from somebody else, from our parents, our grandparents, our schoolmates, our university professors, you name it. There are so many ways that we can gain and inherit understanding that it shapes our worldview. And we're all going to have, just like we've had a different past, we're all going to have a completely different present. For example, I am here, you are somewhere else. You could be in a different time and space. You could be watching this video in 100 years and wondering with awe how Sydney once was, how the harbourside buildings are no longer here. So we're going to have a different present. Even though we all live in the eternal now, we are all going to experience a different presence. Even if we're in the same place at the same time, we're going to be looking at different things, we're going to notice different things, and we're going to place different emphasis, different meaning on the stimuluses or the stimuli that are being interpreted and coming our way. And we're all going to have a different future. There's no doubt about that. No two people are going to live the same life. No two people are going to have the same experience in the same time. So we need to close the loop, is what I'm getting at. Each person, because we're teleological in nature, we are forced to make meaning of things. We need to close the loop and solve the problems that we face. And by closing the loop, by finding a solution, by taking meaning or making meaning, it may be the right or the wrong meaning. And it may add to previous errors in judgment that we've got, so that we get to the point where we become conspiracy theorists. You often see people who have just gone down a particular path. They watch particular YouTubes, they have particular views, and slowly but surely those views become more and more radical with time, because they continue to build their confirmation biases by adding evidence to their basis of understanding. And it's understandable, and you need to realise that confirmation bias is the way we're wired. If you have a belief, if you think something is true, you're going to scour the universe. Your reticular activating system is going to scour the universe to find evidence to support whatever notion you have. So be wary, I guess, is the point, that we can be manipulated, and what we see or what we think is real, the slithers of reality that we see, may not actually be complete reality. It may be a figment of our imagination, but we add it to other figments of imagination, and we can build an erroneous or a false view of the world, which can cause us to be very, very different in terms of how we see things to other people. The second point the author makes here is that the media often inflates data to create drama so as to increase the click-through rate. And data is often used to catch attention and mislead. Now, we've got lots of friends, we've known people throughout the years who are drama queens. Everything they do is surrounded by drama, and the reason why they do that is to capture your attention. And by capturing your attention, then they can continue to hold your attention and to feast on being the center of your attention. And then once they've got your attention, then they need to fill in the time. They need to keep you attentive, and in order to keep you paying attention, they will continue to create drama, to inflate data, to make things bigger and more dramatic than what they actually need to be. And that in itself is a bit of a disease. But we know there are lots of people around us who exaggerate things. They exaggerate the findings. They don't check the sources. They don't need to check the sources because they don't care whether or not what they're saying is right or wrong. All they need to do is to fill their thirst, their craving for attention, regardless of whether or not they hoodwink, regardless of whether or not they influence the people around them in a negative way. It's of no consequence to them because all they want is to connect. All they want is to feel comfortable themselves without any care on whether or not what they're saying, what they're doing, how they're influencing other people is going to cause them to see the world in a incorrect way. We need to check the sources and don't take people's word for as being factual. We need to check the sources for misinformation and disinformation. The difference between misinformation and disinformation is that misinformation is when people just don't know what they're talking about. They haven't checked the sources, they just take it as being true and continue to pass it on, live, learn and pass it on. Disinformation is when you know that what you're saying is bullshit, that you know what you're saying is incorrect, but you say it anyway for some particular reason, for some particular goal, and to achieve some particular outcome, much of which is just to maintain connection with people, much of which is just to create drama and to have people interested and listening to the crap that you have to say. And the last point that the author here makes is that a lot of people mix up correlation with cause. And we saw this a lot during the pandemic with the rubbish that the anti-vaxxers and the freedom wankers were saying all along. We need to understand, and this is a simple thing in life, just because two things correlate doesn't mean that they cause a certain outcome. Correlation is seen as a cause by many people, which is a falsehood, which is false. Numbers don't lie, but people do. People lie by omission. My wife often says to me that I lie by omission. She could be right, she could be wrong. But the fact is that by not telling people the whole story, by omitting certain facts, then that in itself is a lie, and it influences what people believe and what people think. So you need to make sure that when people are telling you a story, you need to be aware that part of that story is probably missing. They're giving you a slither of information, a slither of reality, but you need to be able to check the facts, check the other slithers, to make sure that the piece of the puzzle that they're showing you, the slither of the puzzle that they're showing you, is in fact representative of the total puzzle, as opposed to a slither which is irrelevant, that takes you away from the truth and leads you to a place where you can't come back from. Because it's what you leave out of the story that can have a major impact on the information or the total picture that you need to see. And as I said before, we need to check the sources. We need to check the information. We need to give it the pub test as to whether or not it makes sense or it doesn't make sense. And when people are presenting you with a particular number and a story, you need to understand that that is probably one piece, that is one slither of the story, which may not be the true representation of what is going on. So it's up to us to be curious. It's up to us to pay attention and to look for corroborating facts or for things that are going to tell us whether or not that particular expression, that particular viewpoint is real, is accurate, or whether or not it's just a manipulation, a falsehood. Because what we see isn't necessarily real. People, especially these days through multimedia, you can have pictures of people and you can have a story, but that picture may not be real. You can see videos of people talking and presenting, but that video may not be real. That may not be a real person. So we need to be careful, I guess, is the key point. So once again, whenever you're presented with a number, always understand that a number on its own is very, very dangerous. You need to have other numbers in order to compare and contrast that particular number to understand its relativity, to understand its proportionality, and to understand its relevance. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me on this episode of Jim's 5 a.m. Club. I just need to pick up my pace now to head to work. It's coming close to 6 o'clock, and it's going to be a short day today. We're going to have a barbecue at work. As I said, it's the day before the long weekend, the Australia Day weekend, a day where Australia celebrates the fact that we are all one, that we are united, and that we are one of the greatest countries in the world, having invited people from all over the world to come and live here, to come and share in the glory, the riches, the resources of this most magnificent country, to toil, to labour, to contribute, to partner, and to take this arid land, a land of flood, a land of drought, and make it one of the finest examples in the world of what multiculturalism can actually be. To have people with different backgrounds from different cultures come together and be one. To be one and to be Australian. Take care everybody, yassas, and bye for now.